All right, everybody, welcome back to the show. Happy to welcome today longtime friend, the famed journalist Chris Cillizza. You know him from the Washington Post, you know him from CNN, you know him from YouTube and Substack. Chris Cillizza, great to see you.
Oh my gosh, happy to be here. This is great.
I want to get to cable news and podcasting and all that.
I have so many thoughts.
But let's give the people what they want, some punditry, and I've got a few items here.
Okay.
We don't have to linger too long, but I'd love to get your take. So top of mind right now, I think is Pete Hegseth, Donald Trump's nominee for Department of Defense. What do you? What's the over under? I guess. What are the odds?
I guess it's so interesting. Like, I feel like I've been about the same, even though I do watch these betting markets, like, Kalshi and Polymarket, just because I'm sort of fascinated by like the fact that you can bet on politics. I think is like going to be a huge thing over the next 4 years. But I'm also just kind of interested like where people are spending their money. And if you look at Hegseth, it kind of went way down, the week and a half after, 25, 30% odds. And now it's way up. And I've kind of been a little bit more steady in that. I guess the assumption right now is, oh, well, he'll probably make it, right? Like after Joni Ernst they met twice and Joni Ernst seemed to be generally supportive of him. I guess I'm still a little skeptical. Like if I had to pick one person out of the cabinet who doesn't make it, I still think it's Hegseth right now.
Yeah.
And the reason why is like one of the weird, I don't know if it was unforeseen, but certainly one of the consequences of Donald Trump picking all his cabinet nominees within basically a 2-week span. And I get why they did that. I think they wanted to look organized and on top of things in a way that they weren't in 2016. But it's like a 90-day period now where these people have they're just kind of twisting in the wind. There aren't confirmation hearings. I always remind people, we don't even have the new Congress yet, so there's not confirmation hearings, right? There's not a vote. They don't really have a good way to defend themselves. And I just think Hegseth, the Hegseth, there was a boom of negative stories. Now it's faded a little bit right now. But I just think all that stuff's going to come back during the confirmation hearings. And I don't know how that plays. Maybe people will be
maybe
like,
another shoe drops too, right?
Right, and maybe there's more. Right. Pete Hegseth still has the least enviable thing in the world right now, which is the investigative powers of the mainstream media are still mostly focused on him, not exclusively, but mostly. And Chris Cillizza, I've tried to live a good life, but I would never want all the investigative mainstream media looking at me. So there might be more to come out. And I just think the re-airing of some of that stuff is going to make him look really bad to the broader public. Does that change things? I don't know. But I still think if I had to pick, I'd put him before I'd put like a Tulsi Gabbard or an RFK Jr. And maybe it's 50-50. I think the betting markets, I haven't looked this morning, but it's like way up, like 75%. I don't think it's that likely.
And I don't know if you saw, but I guess he is releasing. There was a woman who accused him of inappropriate behavior, and he is, I think, releasing her from this non-disclosure settlement or something. My interpretation of that, Chris, you tell me if I'm being too cynical, is we're daring you to go public because it's then you will be attacked. You will be a target of MAGA. But maybe that's too cynical. Maybe that's too cynical.
My view of politics is you can never be too cynical. That's been my default setting for a long time. No, I think that's exactly what it is. I mean,
and if she doesn't go public, if she thinks better of it, like I don't. Yeah, then it's accuser.
What else can I do?
Yeah, my accuser wouldn't even come forward. It must be obviously a weekend.
I think that is exactly right. And the thing is that we kind of know Hegseth doesn't need to kind of do even the wink, wink, nod, nod to the MAGA movement, right? Like we kind of know that like they will go after you. And this woman would have to know that. your life will be altered. Maybe not forever, but it will be altered. I mean, look, you get swatting attempts, you get bomb threats, I mean, it's like, do you want all that? Like, what's the upside?
Yeah. And also any of your past indiscretions, which may have no bearing on the situation at hand, drag it's the bimbo eruptions kind of
totally.
scenario.
I think you have read it exactly right. It is a dare. And I have to say, like, if I was advising that woman, I would be like, don't come forward. It's just having seen people's lives destroyed by this stuff. I'm just not sure, because it's not like if she well, I don't know. I guess it's whatever. I was going to say, it's not like if she comes forward, his nomination is doomed. But depending on what she says, maybe it would be doomed. But I don't know. You really are. You are at least putting your life will change in negative ways for some period of time, and maybe forever, but definitely for some period of time. And I don't know. Maybe I'm too sort of self-focused and not country-focused, but I don't think it's worth it.
What do you make of all these drone sightings in New Jersey? What are they?
So I mean, I don't know. My natural tendency, having come up in mainstream media, is like when, and I forget who it was. You may know, Matt, but like, a member of Congress is like, there's a mothership that Iran has. My general sense, it usually is to be like, is there really? And then at the same time, when it comes to technology and sort of what we're doing, I feel like technology has far outpaced our ability to understand technology. At least I should say my understanding and I think
it's not just you.
that right. I never want to speak for others. That delta is real. I have friends, because I live in DC. I mean, we live in this world. I have plenty of friends who are like government contractors, and some of the stuff that they tell me about like defense spending and what we're doing. I mean, so I guess I don't want to just roll my eyes and be dismissive of it. It is definitely weird. I will admit, I am sort of fascinated with the whole, I guess we're now I grew up in the 80s when you called them UFOs, but I guess we're now calling them unidentified aerial phenomenon, UAPs. I'm totally interested in it. I don't know if Harry Reid, the late Nevada senator, got me hooked because he was very into it. But like, I do think, Trump has talked about releasing more information related to this stuff. I mean, if you watch, this is about a month ago. I, of course, was driving around listening to C-SPAN because I'm a gigantic loser. So I'm listening to C-SPAN radio. And it was during they had a hearing in which they had a bunch of very credible people talking about unidentified aerial phenomenon. And, these are like longtime Defense Department. They're not like selling a book. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's like these people have no reason to lie, particularly under oath. And it was like very credible. They were like, look, these are things that like we don't have an explanation for. And so I guess I'm just older now, but I guess I'm less willing to just be totally dismissive. Like, yeah, it's just some amateur drone guy. I don't know. What do you think? I mean, I don't like, people ask me this. I'm like, look, I have 0.0 expertise in this space.
Yes.
I'm just kind of like interested in it. But like, what do you think it's just all like bullshit, or is it like real?
My expertise comes from listening to Art Bell as a child, so that's my limitation.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is, but my fear is not, extraterrestrials, but other countries, because we had the whole China spy balloon thing.
Absolutely.
And so that's what makes me a little cautious about this.
And you would think,
concerned.
If it is that, or even that's a possibility, we certainly should get to the bottom of it, right? I mean, like, let's figure out if it's amateurs. If it is, great. We can just ignore it. But if it's not,
Dude, these drones have changed a lot of things. I mean, like my dad was a prison guard for 30 years in Hagerstown, Maryland. So I keep up on prison guard information and my local paper. And a couple years ago, I was looking, and there was a scenario where somebody flew a drone over the prison where my dad used to work. and dropped contraband. I forget what it was. It might have
Oh
been a
my.
knife or something. But it was like a scenario that would have been like virtually impossible to imagine 20, 30 years ago.
No. Yeah.
You know, if you tried to do that with a helicopter, they would have obviously seen you. And now it's like you could a couple $100 probably pull it off. So
And I
it's
always
just,
feel like I don't know if it's like me watching Homeland or some of these like spy shows, but I now feel like you're always, maybe this has been true for a long time, but you're always kind of being watched too. It's like, and I think that, the whole like security versus privacy conversation that we had, like when they were reauthorizing the Patriot Act, for example, like, I feel like we've kind of jettisoned that conversation. It's like, well, let's just let a thousand children spring of technology. I mean, I saw, who was it this morning? I think it was the Google CEO. I can't remember who it was. It was some very high end tech executive, basically saying like, when AI gets the ability to kind of self-edit, like we should be worried. I'm like, yeah, like I feel like that should be a bigger story.
yeah.
I mean, like it's like we should probably be talking about that more. It's like technology is not just a beneficent, like we know this, right? I mean, even the internet, which we can all agree is an amazing technology, well, it's also brought a huge number of problems to our society that we're still grappling with. This, I mean, from my kid, I worry about this with my kids every day. They're 15 and 12. And it's like, and the long-term effects of it, we try to limit it. But who the hell knows? Like, we know technology is just not good. And we know these actors are just not good. And yet we seem to be like, all right.
Yeah. And so this is a Jonah Goldberg insight, and I'm sure others too, but that technology actually changes the world way more than ideas, right? We think that these philosophers come up with ideas, but really, whether it's the automobile or the birth control pill, or drones or AI, whatever, Twitter. I mean, Donald Trump. I don't think Donald Trump gets elected in a world without Twitter, and certainly without reality TV. And there's no vote. We don't have a national conversation. Do we want to do this? There's no vote. Like I remember in DC, 10, 15 years ago, one day it's like all of these bikes popped up on the sidewalk where you could just like, scan a QR code or something and ride a scooter or a bike around like without a helmet. And it was like, I don't remember being asked if that was a good idea. Didn't read about it in the paper. Maybe there was a meeting somewhere. It just happened. And it's almost like there's a sense that technology is like unstoppable, that it's unthinkable to try to never mind wind it back, to just not do something. If we can do it, I
totally agree.
Totally the whole Goldblum.
And that's, I mean, and like that to me is, I think about that all the time now. And like the drone thing is like a piece of it. And again, I don't know if it's getting older and I'm more aware of it, and my kids are getting older, and like I see its influence, sort of pernicious, I would argue, influence on them. But like, but by the way, I always say, not my expertise, just something I'm sort of like one of the many things I worry about.
Indeed. Well, this might be more your expertise. Mitt Romney is in the news this week. I guess he is kind of doing these exit interviews as he rides off into the sunset. And one of the things I think he said on one of the Sunday shows was, look, hey, Donald Trump didn't pretend to be anything else. Like he got elected saying he was going to do all these things, and let's just give him a chance and see how it goes. So what do you make of that? And then just more generally, Mitt Romney, because he really is. I mean, I would have thought that if you go from Mitt Romney as the 2012 nominee, you would have had a few stops along the way before you got to Donald Trump.
Totally.
We went from Mitt Romney to Donald Trump.
Totally.
In 4 years.
I remind people all the time when I'm like giving a speech or whatever, I'm like, look, who were the Republican presidential nominee and VP nominee in 2012, which was 12 years ago? Mitt Romney and Paul Ryan. They are at best loosely affiliated with the modern Republican Party. That was a decade ago. To your point, Matt, it wasn't 100 years ago where you're like, oh man, the Republican Party has really changed in the past decade, a century. It was 10 years ago.
And all the people now who are running the show were Democrats basically, like
Yes.
Elon Musk, RFK Jr., Tulsi Gabbard,
Yep.
Gabbard, whatever.
It's
Donald Trump.
It's a remarkable shift. So I think so. Two things. First, on what Romney said, and then on Romney. On what Romney said, I actually totally agree with him. I mean, one of the things that I think is so funny in a sad way from at least parts of the media, and definitely the Never Trump media, is like the shock that Donald Trump picked people who aren't in the cone of selection. Like, yes, Pete Hegseth clearly has, at best, different experience, at worst, not enough experience to run the Department of Defense. But what did you think Donald Trump was going to do?
Right.
He badmouthed and ran out Mattis and Milley and John Kelly. Like, he ran expressly on the idea that these people don't know what the hell. I mean, these are his words. They don't know what the hell they're doing. So he's not going to be like, what 4-star general within the military political establishment can I pick? Like, why the hell would he do that? You know, and it's like, even Gates, like, I think Gates was kind of like Trump seeing how far he could push things. But even Gates, it's like, he's not going to pick someone probably right off the bat who's just like someone that, for example, President Mitt Romney, though it never happened, President Mitt Romney would pick. That's not the point. He expressly ran on not picking those people. So, like, this is aside from the debate over whether RFK Jr. or Tulsi Gabbard or Kristi Noem or, you know, pick your person, Hegseth are qualified, whatever the hell that means, right, in this day and age, but qualified to do these jobs. It's more about, like, we shouldn't be surprised by it. You know, Romney, to me, probably, given his unwillingness to bend to Trumpism, probably navigated the last decade, in my mind, as well as you could, right? He never really capitulated, right? He's not Ted Cruz, right? Who clearly doesn't like Donald Trump, who clearly doesn't agree with the direction Donald Trump's taking the party, but who is so ambitious that he just, it outruns all those things. He's not even John Thune, who kind of, you know, Trump, I always remind people, Trump tried to get Kristi Noem to primary John Thune. I mean, like, he actively tried to recruit a primary challenger. Thune, no fan of Trump, but Thune saw the writing on the wall and kind of moved in that direction. You know, Romney wasn't that guy. Now, Romney is older when he came into office. He had already run for president twice, right? I mean,
and he's rich too. I mean, he doesn't need to cash in later.
Correct.
Yeah.
So it's like, to your point, there are a lot of reasons why Romney was able to stay, quote unquote, principled when some of these people weren't. Mitt Romney 25 years ago with less money, maybe it's a different story. Yeah. But, you know, I think he can go out of office and say, like, look, the party fundamentally changed. I was not comfortable with that change, and I did what I could to speak out where I could.
No, I agree. I think, you know, he handled it as well as probably anyone has, which is, it's tough. Well, the crazy thing is, remember, if you look at the people who have really managed it well, Nikki Haley actually managed it great. And then somehow got back involved. That was the weird thing. She made it out of the first administration.
She should have waited. I think in retrospect, if you ask Nikki Haley, she'll never tell you, but if you asked her, she should have waited and not run in 2024, because then it would have been open. Well, it wouldn't have been. She could have run against either President Kamala Harris, President Joe Biden, or an open seat. You know, I think that might have been the best. You know, timing is so important in these things. I mean, Hillary Clinton should have run for president in 2004, and she didn't. And we know what happened from there. You know what I mean? Like, timing matters hugely. I was thinking of that with Kamala Harris. You know, she's trying to think of, like, 2028. When does she run? It's like Barack Obama got the timing right. George W. Bush got the timing right. Donald Trump weirdly got the timing right. You know, it's not just like you're such a good candidate. It's like, are you good in the moment when people are looking for the thing you're looking for? Because Nikki Haley, I mean, I know you have too. I mean, I've known her since she was in the state Senate in South Carolina. She's super talented. Like, she's a very able candidate. I think she proved it on the campaign trail. It's just not what the Republican Party wants, and that's the problem.
So, big question, but what do Democrats do from here? And do you see anyone as the, front runner?
So I did this. One of the people, I promise I will answer. This may be slightly a roundabout thing, but that's why I like podcasts. It's not 30 minutes of television time. So,
right. News and weather together on the nines. And in 10 seconds, Chris, before we go to break, 10 seconds, what did Democrats do?
It's so true. I always remember being on CNN and they'd be like, it would be like me and the host and like 2 or 3 other guests. And they'd be like, all right, we got a tight 3:30 for this block. I'm like, we have 3 minutes and 30 seconds for 3 people and the host to talk. This is not going to be a good segment. Anyway,
I've done that with 10 people on a panel. Come on.
It's just the worst. It's so true. It's just the worst. It's just like not a good way. It's not a good way to do business. Anyway, I had a conversation last week with Van Jones, and Van Jones is someone who do you know Van at all?
Oh, yeah, a little, because I was a CNN contributor when he was there too. Yeah,
so I know him a little. When I worked at CNN, but he's on the West Coast. We didn't see each other all that much, but I always kind of liked him in that he wasn't totally predictable. I feel like so many people on television now are just totally predictable. Like, it doesn't matter what the question is. I know what they're going to say, which to me, it just makes it boring. And Van is interesting. So I reached out to Van and I was like, hey, will you do this Substack live, just a live like this on Substack? Like, will you do a chat with me? And we did it last week. And I would encourage people to go watch some of it. It's free. You can watch it. Or read the transcript. I mean, he eviscerated the Democratic Party. Like in terms that he was like, we are the stupid ones. We are the idiots. Donald Trump is the smart one. He won, which, maybe you can argue a little oversimplification, but to me, it was really important because I do talk to so many Democrats who are like, Donald Trump didn't win the popular vote. Donald Trump. And I'm like, I feel like you're whistling past the political graveyard a little bit here. Like, even if you do fine in 2026, which you may, because, history suggests the first 2 years of a president's term, the other party does well in Congress and midterms, et cetera, et cetera. I think that you have a problem when you really don't win anywhere outside of the 2 coasts. I mean, there's this great thing kicking around the internet, and it's a Christmas card from a Republican data targeting firm where it says, Merry Christmas, and it has all the red counties that Donald Trump won. And then it says, ... and Happy Holidays. And it has the blue counties, which is a great idea, that Kamala Harris won. And it really is illustrative of just like how little the Democratic now, again, land doesn't vote. There's lots of places where almost no one lives in the middle of the country, but
it's up there with Jack Donaghy's holiday. It was it was Happy Holidays, and then you open it up is what terrorists say.
Best. Well, I'm just glad, thanks to Donald Trump, we're saying Merry Christmas again.
Me
because,
too.
That ban on Christmas. So, like, to me, if you look at that, you look at the fact that, yes, they didn't lose 8 Senate seats, but they lost 4 Senate seats. They lost in Pennsylvania, they lost in Ohio, and yes, they lost West Virginia and Montana, which they probably shouldn't have had in the first place. They didn't win the House. Like, I think they have a brand problem. I mean, I don't know how else you conclude that, right? Like, the one I always cite, to me, this is so illustrative, and we don't talk that much about it, but like Missouri. Okay, Missouri, I mean, you're younger than me, but when we were both younger, Missouri was weirdly actually a swing-ish state at the presidential level. It no longer is, right? Trump won it by 19 in 2024. Josh Hawley, despite Democrats saying that their candidate was going to beat Josh Hawley, my God, the number of emails I got on that. Josh Hawley won it by double digits. He didn't win by 19, but he won easily. Okay. That same Missouri electorate also passed a $15 minimum wage, so a minimum wage increase, and loosened abortion restrictions. So how in the hell do you lose convincingly at the federal level, and then these things that are clearly like more associated with Democratic priorities than Republican ones, how the hell do those things pass? And I think you have to conclude that disconnect is a brand issue. Anything with a D after it is a problem. And I don't know how you can say like everything's fine if that's the case.
I wonder how much of it is actually Democrats' fault. And some of it clearly is. Like, we've got video of Kamala Harris saying things from 2019 that don't play in Peoria. But I wonder how much of it is actually Democrats' fault versus somebody on the internet said this, or somebody in San Francisco had this trans reading hour or whatever. Like, I wonder how much of it is the left, nut picking versus actually Democrats' responsibility.
I actually think it's more the kind of left. I mean, people say there's a lot of focus on wokeism lost Kamala Harris the election. It's like, I don't actually disagree with, I don't think the one thing cost her the election, but I think that was part of it. But the truth is, like, she never talked about woke stuff during the election.
She was campaigning with Liz Cheney.
Right. I mean, like, yes, I know the 2019 clip of her saying, trans people should have surgeries in prison or whatever. Like, she clearly took some of those positions in 2019 and 2020, but it's not like she talked about that in the campaign. The issue is, I think, twofold. One, the liberal left, the base of the party, is way to the left of the average person in the country, further to the left than the Republican base is to the right. And two, Fox News, if you ever watch Fox News, they do a really good job in terms of ratings of highlighting every time there is a trans reading hour. Yeah. You would think that there are trans reading hours happening every 10 minutes in every city in this country. It's anecdotal, but they don't notice that, or they choose not to note it. And so I think they have painted a very effective caricature of the left that the left has contributed to, but a very effective caricature of the left that has seeped beyond the sort of Fox News viewer into sort of broader mainstream culture. I mean, I really do think a lot of people thought Kamala Harris was like a legit communist, who wanted to sort of make everything a collective. Because she was from San Francisco and California, you know what I mean? Not because anything she had said in particular, but because that character is out there.
Wow, I think you're right. Okay, last topic before we move into solipsistic navel gazing.
Yes. That's always my favorite. That's the best kind of navel gazing.
It is, and this will be a transition topic. Okay, a segue. And that is ABC News.
Yes.
Came to a settlement with Donald Trump, $15 million, because George Stephanopoulos, with an interview with Nancy Mace, Stephanopoulos said that Trump had been found liable for rape. It's actually sexual assault. I'm not sure that's a great distinction that if you're Trump, that you'd want to hash out. Yeah. And there were extenuating circumstances because the judge in the case had said something to the effect of, well, colloquially speaking, it could be understood that to be the same thing. So why did ABC News do this? And doesn't this open the floodgates for targeting journalists, even if it's just a chilling effect, even if they don't actually go through with it?
1 billion%. This happened over a weekend, so I guess I get that it wasn't get that much attention, but this is a gigantically important story, right? I mean, like not just for the kind of navel gazers like me who are into journalism stories, for exactly the reason that you said. Look, ABC and Disney, its parent company, they still have plenty of money. They could have litigated this out, and let's be honest, it's very hard to prove defamation against a public figure. It's very hard. The chances of ABC actually losing this case if it went all the way are 10%, 5%. I mean, not large. So why did they do it? Well, they did it, I think. It seems somewhat transparent to me. They did it because Disney is a corporation with a board and shareholders, and deposing the president of the United States, or incoming president of the United States, and having a public fight with the president of the United States, who, by the way, has made clear he's perfectly comfortable being vengeful, is not what they want to do. To me, it's of a piece with Bezos stepping in on the non-endorsement in the Washington Post, the owner of the LA Times stepping in, non-endorsement there. The Amazon last week, Amazon, ChatGPT, and Meta all making $1 million donation to the Trump inauguration fund. There is hey buddy, we're cool, right? This is all good between us. Like this seems to me to be, and I mean, I get it on one level. Like they are corporations with boards and shareholders, and they need to make money. But this is the problem when billionaires and giant corporations own media companies. They've got a lot of various interests. And to me, the settlement, if I'm George Stephanopoulos, I'd be like, I mean, I'm not going to swear, but I'd be like, what would you say is going on here? Because it feels as though they were kind of like, hey, we're going to push you under the bus because the profit matters more than the sort of capital J journalism. And the chilling effect to me, like national media is one thing, but local media who don't have the resources to have a protracted legal fight with the president, even if it's a frivolous lawsuit, or independent creators who certainly don't have the legal, like I'll point people to on the settlement happened on December 14th. On December 15th, the New York Times ran a story about how Donald Trump and his people were aggressively working to crack down on media coverage critical of them. That's not a coincidence, folks. I think I'm glad you mentioned it, Matt, because I just think it's a hugely important story.
Kash Patel, I think, is suing somebody.
I mean,
never
and again, whether that suit, any of these suits get decided is, I don't want to say it's beside the point. I mean, it does matter, but the, like I don't have $1 million to $500,000, $250,000 to pay lawyers over an extended period of time. I mean, and I think if that's always in the back of your mind, that is going to impact what you say and what you write.
And as you were, I think, just implying, you don't even have to lose the case. It's just having to lawyer up that could bankrupt most people.
Absolutely. And the worry of that is real, and I think that's exactly the point. It's like you don't even have Donald Trump or the people around him don't even have to file a case. It's the threat of filing a lawsuit that is potentially damaging and chilling. I think it's a gigantic story. All to the bad. I think ABC said, when I saw that, you know what I thought of in the sports world? The Cleveland Browns paying Deshaun Watson $250 million guaranteed. Like, you are doing something that is bad for you, but is setting a precedent. Like, every quarterback now is going to be like, I mean, Deshaun Watson got $250 million guaranteed.
What am I worth?
Exactly. Yeah. And I just think it has this reverberation, this echo that goes way beyond just because, yes, $15 million is not a lot of money to Donald Trump. It's certainly not a lot of money to ABC and Disney, but that's not the point, right? The point is that they did it at all.
Well, if Brock Purdy gets paid, then it'll all have been worth it.
Everything will have been worth it.
This whole thing with ABC, it makes me think of like the media did when we were growing up, at least. I mean, the media did such a good job of patting itself on the back for Woodward and Bernstein and the Washington Post standing up to the Nixon administration and the Attorney General and how heroic they were.
Yep.
Man, it's come a long way.
It's easy to be heroic. It's easy to be heroic when you basically have a money machine minting money in the basement. It's a lot harder to be heroic when the business end of journalism is, I mean, if it's, I don't want to say not fixable, but I would say in an extremely dire place. I mean, what's changed other than that, and that to me, again, I always say it to my kids, like anyone can be a good sport when you win. It's being a good sport when you lose. That's the hard part. Being gracious in victory is one thing. Being gracious in defeat's way harder.
Big time.
Yeah.
So you have a piece, a Substack up today saying it's the end of the cable TV era. Obviously, that it's not just newspapers, but cable news as well. I mean, I remember. I wish I'd been a little older, man. And then the '90s, to me, that was the golden era. When I was, like in high school or whatever, like watching cable news, and I'm like Tucker Carlson, Pat Buchanan, Jack Germán, Eleanor Clift, or whatever, Anna Marie Cox, like,
yes,
it's like they were it was like the coolest thing. If you could have gotten on cable news in that era, you would have been like a rock star, man. You you never have to buy lunch again at the Palm. You might even get one of those little, caricatures. Now, toward the end, man, I would do cable hits, and nobody even tweeted about it. It was like nobody
tree
called,
falling in the forest. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but talk about this. How far it's
I mean,
fallen.
I just so CNN's ratings are down 46% versus earlier in the year. MSNBC's are down 50%. Fox's are up. Now, Fox to me is doing a different thing than MSNBC and CNN. It is a news organization, sort of, but it's also kind of an entertainment organization. If you watch Fox regularly, I try to watch it a couple times a week. It's a lot of like reporting on the news rather than reporting the news. So I think they're just doing a little bit different thing. And to their credit, they have basically 100% of conservative mindshare. So I also think the Fox rating increase is kind of like when your team in sports wins, you want to read every single thing that's ever been written about how they won. When your team loses, you want to pretend that the game never happened, right? So I think some of it's just like we're standing a little too close to the picture because all of this just is still pretty recent. Like, the election was, I'm looking at my calendar, the election was, 6 weeks ago, almost 6 weeks ago tomorrow. So, but I would say, even for the people who are like, see, Fox News's ratings are up, and that shows that real, quote unquote, real media is surviving while the liars and the liberal press are down. I would point to the overall trend line from 2014 until today is down it's the worst for broadcast TV, but for all these places, like there was a sugar high in 2020 with Trump, and then it's been a slow decline. It's the rise. I know we talked about 2024 as like the podcast election. To me, like that almost is like too narrow. I think it was really kind of the alternative media election. And I don't mean alternative media like the city paper.
Rogan isn't just an audio podcast.
No.
More people probably watch the YouTube video.
48 million people watch it on YouTube. Like, to me, the biggest threat to mainstream media is YouTube. I mean, it's just like, and I'm not even sure that they can win that fight. The mainstream media, like I think they may have already lost it. But like, to me, this election was the YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, Substack, podcast, all of those things, independent creators, all of those things eat away at the mainstream media. And the problem I would have, I always say to people, if somebody came to me tomorrow and was like, hey, do you want to be the president of CNN? I'd be like, absolutely. And if they gave me truth serum and said, well, what are you going to do? I'd be like, I have absolutely no idea. So it's easier. It's easier to criticize from the outside. But I do think it's kind of, mainstream media is in kind of an emperor has no clothes moment. It's like the dirty little secret of mainstream media is there is no dirty little secret. You know what I mean? Like, there's no thing that's going to fix it.
Well,
and I just think,
let's be honest too, Chris. Look, there's a lot of crap on the internet, obviously, and the barrier to entry is low. And if you want to learn something, I think the quality of, if you're listening to the right podcast, and some of those are mainstream media podcasts, like the New York Times The Daily is a good podcast.
Absolutely.
But also Rogan is good. I mean, and if you want to learn the Bulwark, the Dispatch, I love your videos and your Substacks. I mean, there's a lot of good information. And we were joking earlier about, okay, you've got 3 minutes or 30 seconds. Tell me everything. What like
explain the economy. You have 15 seconds.
And now the technology is getting better. I mean, you and I are doing the talking head thing, but more and more people now have the two cameras and the sets. Like a Pod Save America kind of stuff. So I think that honestly, if you really are wanting to learn something, it's cable news is not that great.
No,
really.
I have tried to be very guarded in my criticism of CNN in particular, because they laid me off. They decided they didn't want me anymore. It was not a mutual parting. I would have stayed there. And I don't want it to ever come across as sour grapes. So I'm always like I had a great time there. They were wonderful to me. Like, I don't have any ill feelings toward them, but there's one show that I will not mention, but there's one show where it's just basically, they just have on people to shout at one another. And like, I feel like I'm getting dumber. Like I can't imagine there's any inherent news or analytical value from that. Like, it's just the whole point appears to be just to have people yell at each other to create, God, I can't believe I'm saying this, viral moments that can be shared. And it just feels so transparent to me. Like, it's obvious what they're doing.
And it's boring.
Well, let's just get two piranhas in a bowl. They're gonna fight. It's so pretty. I
find it boring too, to be honest with you. Like,
yes, it's just so predictable.
And I was a pawn in that to a
me
certain
too.
occasion.
Me too. I mean, like, I'm not immune from it. And if CNN called me today and say, "Hey, you want to come on and talk about whatever?" I'd probably be like, "Sure." I mean, I don't. Now there are certain things I wouldn't do, but in general, I just.
You know what's fun is telling them, and I'll expand this out to the entire cable news world, not just one network, but telling them no, especially when it's like late at night. You want to come on at the 11 o'clock hour. They'll say the 11 o'clock hour. What they mean is
that means 11:50. Yes.
And you want to come on then, and they're not used to hearing no. I think they're probably getting more used to it today, but for a long time, they were stunned when I'm like, I like to go to bed early, actually. So, thank you. But
and I'm at a point now where it's like I kind of do the shows that I like and the people that I like, but I'm not just going to go on anything, because I do think like there are definitely shows on cable that like ill serve us. I don't want to be like ill serve democracy. It's not like I'm, always, I'm not a philosopher, but I do think that it ill serves the news and information community. I think, candidly, I think CNN should have an hour. All these networks, I would do an hour show. Doesn't have to be us, two white guys talking, but like do a show that is effectively like a podcast.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, like,
why not try it? Why not? Look at what the NFL did with the Eli Manning and Peyton Manning. That
absolutely.
Sort of thing. Like experiment.
It's the weirdly most I don't mean conservative, like conservative or liberal. I mean conservative in terms of not risk taking. It's the weirdly most conservative industry I've ever come across. Yeah. Like, they don't ever. People are like, Morning Joe was such a breakthrough. I'm like, let me stop you there. It absolutely was a breakthrough in terms of like knocking down the fourth wall, making it more casual. And they never would have done it if Don Imus hadn't insulted the Rutgers basketball team.
And and by the way,
it's Chris, not like they were plotting like, oh, let's do this show. They just they needed to fill time.
No, but people forget this. MSNBC, and my recollection is, after Imus imploded, they experimented with multiple different like crew members, sets, names, different people got shots. They really, I think it was like a month or two of like just sort of feeling it out and seeing what worked. And the Morning Joe emerged as the
right.
As the option.
It's just they are for an industry where, like, if I came to you, I'll say if someone came to me and they said, "Hey, Chris, subscriptions to your Substack are down 50% year over year, and your YouTube views and subscribers are down 50%. I'd be like, all right, well, I obviously like have a problem, and I need to try to do different things to attract audience, right? I mean, it doesn't take a business genius, which I am not, to figure that out. And yet, if you turn on cable, it's all the same shit. I mean, to be totally honest, like, it's all the same. It's like, yeah, everybody's got their hour, but they're doing basically, there's nothing like innovative or interesting happening on cable.
And I think a lot of that, Chris, my guess is that it used to be, if you had an hour, it was kind of your hour. You were the host.
Huge deal.
You could hire your own producer. And now my sense is that it's the Jeff Zucker who lays out, this is what the day is going to be.
Mm-hmm.
And even if you're a host of an hour, you're existing within the paradigm of the head coach calling. You know what I mean? Like, you don't have the autonomy to make.
But my thing is,
it's called the Matt Lewis Show, but it's really has to. These are the 5 topics we have to talk about, because that's what the boss said.
But like, I mean, I know this didn't work yesterday, but like, I like Dan Campbell and the Lions because he's like, man, we don't want to give Josh Allen the ball that much. We're going to onside kick in the first half. Like, it didn't work. But I like the idea, and he's now normalized going for it on fourth down. I like the idea of trying to think differently when you have a problem that your current solutions aren't solving. And to me, it's like, why isn't the head coach, whoever that is at these networks, why isn't the head coach saying, like, let's just try other stuff? It's not as though people are not interested in news adjacent content. They clearly are. I mean, it is, there's 1,000 things that have sprung up that have been successful. They're just not interested in the content, the format that is currently being used. And by the way, has been used since sort of, the beginning of cable television. So why not try something different given the obvious problems that are facing the industry? It's
so
not
much of it too, Chris, is I think right now you were talking about Donald Trump's nominees and how they're not normal, they're not establishment. Well, the public doesn't want normal. The public doesn't want establishment. That's why
totally
Trump won. And I think the same thing is like when I go on cable news, or when you go on cable news these days, it's like you become the establishment. Like the set looks like the establishment. You put on your necktie and dress up.
It's like the last place to wear a tie.
Yeah, it's like everything about it screams, now we're going to do cable news. And like, does it have to be that way? Why couldn't? But it's almost like, sacrilegious to suggest otherwise.
I'll tell you, this is so interesting. And this is not cable, but this is from my own experience. So when I was at CNN, I was making videos for YouTube twice a week. And we would publish them on CNN too, but mostly they were for YouTube. And they were just kind of like, here's something that's happening in the news. And they were pretty highly produced. They had lower thirds. They had graphics. I would talk some, but there'd be a lot of stuff going on. So CNN gets rid of me. And I'm like, what the hell am I going to do with my life? And I'm like, you know what? I really enjoy doing that. I'm going to continue to do that. So I hire a guy because I can't do any of the graphic stuff. I don't know how to do it. I hire a guy. And this is January 2023. So from January 2023 to January 2024, I'm making YouTube videos twice, maybe 3 times a week. And they honestly look a lot, not exactly, they're slightly less produced, but they're still pretty produced. They look a lot like what I was doing for CNN. You know how many YouTube subscribers I had at the end of that year? 5,000. Yeah, 5,000 total. And you know what the checks I was getting from YouTube were? $32.20 a month. Okay. So then I was like, okay, well, I can't keep paying this guy a couple $100 an episode if I'm making $32 a month. Like it's not, it's just not like financially, it doesn't make sense. So I said to him, thank you. You do great work. I just can't do it. And what I decided to do was legit talk to you on my MacBook, just like I'm talking to you now, go to QuickTime, press record, talk using this microphone CNN gave me. Thank you, CNN. I have 2 things that I still left from CNN, this microphone and these that they gave to us one year, these AirPods. So I've got those 2 things.
I missed that gift. I did get the hoodie.
Oh, that's nice. So I start just legit talking, right? No, all you see is exactly what you see here. Like no graphics, nothing, just me talking. I will end this year with a little over 50,000 subscribers. Yeah. Now it's not 500,000 subscribers. My kids always are like, well, Mr. Beast has 337 million subscribers. Okay, fine. But what does that tell you? Well, what does it tell me? Authenticity is super important, right? Yeah, people want.
It might have hurt you to have the look and feel. The look and feel of cable news. Yeah,
I think it did. I think it was like people were like, I mean, if I want this, I can just watch cable news, right? Yeah. Like, and I take that lesson of like lo-fi sometimes is better. If my phone rings, I have a home phone. When it rings, it's some telemarketer, but when it rings, I lean over and turn it off. I don't re-record the video. You know what I mean? Like I think there's real inherent value in that. And to your point about like, to me, if I was running a cable network, I'd look at that and be like, okay, what can we do that feels less, now we're all on the set, everybody sit up straight, this is your camera, like, I don't know that that's working. In fact, let me revise and extend. That is not working.
Right.
So just try something else.
Let me ask, I want to shift now to you.
Okay. My favorite topic, Matt.
To you specifically. I mean, you talked about losing the gig.
Yes.
you were very big. There was a time when if the Washington Post and New York Times were, you're in the show, man. You're in Yankee Stadium.
Absolutely.
You're in Yankee
Absolutely.
Stadium, right? If you're writing for the Washington Post, going on MSNBC back in the day, and then CNN, yep. And now you're doing these videos, but it's just a different world.
Totally.
And did your identity take a hit? Because you probably for 20 or 25 years were like, your identity was like, I'm a fan. And you were always a very nice guy. I remember meeting you at Buzz Coffee and Alexandria.
Oh, yeah, in Alexandria. Yes.
One time, and you were nice. I was like a blogger at townhall.com or something. You were at the Washington Post. So you were, I'm not saying you were like that, but like, if you're somewhat famous, you get recognized on the street.
Yep.
You're at the Washington Post.
Yep.
And then losing the gig, has that part been hard on you?
Totally. I think I think getting laid off sucks, period. I think it's even harder when you are a, public-ish figure because, Playbook was like, Cillizza laid off. And you know what I mean? Like and so people would like come up to me at my kids' baseball games and be like, hey man, sorry. I mean, they were lovely. Sorry, I just bumped my camera. They were lovely, but it, your business is everybody's business.W, I benefited a lot from being a public figure, financially and otherwise. But what I realized, and I think a couple things. One, everybody is so, and I don't know if this is social media or what, but everybody is so obsessed with telling a story about their lives as opposed to actually the reality of their lives. Like everyone, when I see people get laid off or fired or whatever, and there's going to be more of this or very early next year when these media companies trim way down. It's always like, can't wait for my next opportunity or whatever. Like they had like planned everything out. Yeah. And like, I will be honest, that George Michael Bluth meme from Arrested Development where he just like lays face down on the ground? That was kind of me for a little while.
There's always money in the banana stand, Chris.
There's always money in the banana stand. Yeah. It sucked. I was embarrassed. Like I was ashamed. Like I don't think I did anything wrong, but I was still like ashamed and embarrassed. And I had always thought of myself as like successful. I worked at Roll Call, then I worked at the Washington Post, and I worked at CNN. I was kind of like climbing the ladder and people knew who I was and I made a good salary. And even though I told myself like, look, you're just a cog in the machine, I still think I thought, yeah, but you're special. And not being CNN's Chris Cillizza and just being plain old Chris Cillizza was hard. It was.
And I got to be honest with you, and I was never Chris Cillizza famous, but in 2016, I had a job at the Daily Caller. Mm-hmm. Now I'm technically, I guess, unemployed. I took a buyout from the Daily Beast in July. Mm-hmm. So in 2016, working in DC in an office downtown, 17th and L, had a book deal.
You've made it in your own mind.
Cable news contributorship at CNN.
Yep.
They're flying. It's heady stuff. They're flying you to Vegas to go like.
Oh, it's amazing.
To do debates or to be on TV at a debate, and there is a pecking order. I mean, you're treated. There are people. You go into a restaurant and you're treated a little nicer.
100%.
You get invited to more Christmas parties. I can guarantee you that, especially than if you moved to West Virginia, like I subsequently did. It's just you are treated differently.
100%.
And that. And you notice, I mean,
I still remember. So this was, let's see, CNN laid me off right after Thanksgiving, 2022. And my agents were like, you got to be out there. You got to be seen. So in the spring, the White House Correspondents' Dinner happens. And there's a zillion parties around that. And my agency, which was UTA, they were like, we host a party. Just come and hang out. It'll be good. You get re-entry. You're again, like you're telling the story. You're not ashamed. You're getting out there and blah, blah, blah. Because at that point it was like, well, I'll just get hired by another mainstream media outlet, right? I just got to figure out how to do that. I was there for probably 15 minutes. I remember it was on the waterfront, Georgetown, lovely place. And it was raining. And I stayed for about 50 minutes, and I talked to Kate Baldwin, who I love from CNN, who's the best. And then I was like, you know what? Nobody really wants to talk to me because I don't have something that they want right now. I'm just that guy who used to be on TV, and I remember walking back to my car. I parked super far away because there was no parking. I remember walking back to my car and getting wet and getting back in the car. And like, I had some low moments, but that might have been the lowest where I was like, man, I'm no one. And I think that in retrospect was illustrative of how much I was using what people thought of me as the value judgment on myself, right? Like, getting anyone who tells you they don't like getting recognized on the street is lying to you, because it's incredibly ego stroking. And I love that. I love being on TV. I love being quote unquote someone. And when that's taken from you in a public way, I think you kind of get stripped back to your to the studs, right? Like, you take your house down to the studs and you're like, okay, well, this is all we got, right?
Yeah.
And what do I do now? And the thing I always came back to was like, I still really like talking about politics and thinking about politics and writing about politics. And like, can I figure out a way? I'm not 25. I don't have I have plenty of financial responsibilities. Can I figure out a way to make that work, even if I don't do that? Like, inherently, I enjoy doing this. Can I make it work? And, that's the process of now.
Yeah.
But yeah, so many people spin. I shouldn't be surprised because it's DC, but so many people spin it like, this is exactly what I wanted to happen. That was not the case for me.
Yeah.
Like, I was happy at CNN. I would have stayed until the end of my contract. With all the problems with mainstream media, they were less obvious then than they are now. But, I had to kind of rebuild from the start. And that process, for anyone who's gone through it, sucks. It's really, really challenging.
So I'm going to drop this on you. So, because I noticed you've been writing a little bit about your spiritual journry.
Absolutely.
And you've been visiting different churches and stuff.
Yep.
So I have recently, it's so funny because I've been a Christian, basically. I grew up in a Christian household.
Mm-hmm.
So like, the idea that like there's a God, Jesus died for your sins is nothing new at all to me.
Mm-hmm.
But what I didn't understand until, because I'm still on the journey, right? As you two, Bono might say.
Yep.
But like, to intellectually believe that God exists and that Jesus is Lord is an intellectual thing. But to really make him Lord and encompasses something deeper. And part of it speaks to this conversation we're having right now. And I've been learning this from listening to these Tim Keller. He died, a year or two ago.
Are you listening to Questioning Christianity?
No, I'm listening to his podcasts.
Okay. He did a series of lectures that he's amazing. And he did a series of lectures that they turned into a podcast series called Questioning Christianity, which for me has been enlightening. But yes, Tim Keller is amazing.
You probably know where I'm going with this, because I think this is one of his central themes. And I've been listening to him for a long time, but it's really just, I'm so stupid. It's just finally getting to the inside of me. But like, one of his themes is, for those who haven't listened to him, is that like, if you are defining your identity by your looks or your money or your fame or being a dad or being a husband, if that is how you are defining your value, then first of all, those are all very dangerous things, because they could all be taken from you. You could lose any of those things. You could lose your fame, you could lose your job, your reputation. And that the only thing that can't be taken from you is basically if you were getting your identity from being from God. And that's what it means to really follow. And that's what, and I'm still grappling with this. And I think
it's so simple, but it's like so complex. You know what I mean? Like, it seems so simple. It's the opposite
of being like a workaholic. If you're a workaholic, you are by definition defining your worth and your identity based on that work.
Yep. Yeah. And that's, I think I never made time to think about that stuff because I was so busy climbing the ladder, even while telling myself like, it's not that important. Like it still really mattered to me. I liked telling people that I worked for the Washington Post or CNN. I got real joy out of that and satisfaction out of that. And, that's a hard conversation to have with yourself, or a hard realization about yourself. Is like, oh gosh, I'm way more vain than I would have liked to, than I told myself I was.
Yeah, you're not the only one.
Yeah, no, I know. And I know. And that's why I'm trying to be as transparent, whether it's about faith or getting laid off or like what, being a dad, whatever, all these things, these challenges in life, because it's like, I don't know. I think there's too much. And again, I do think social media plays a role in this. There's too much kind of like Instagramming of your whole life, like telling yourself the story of your life, as opposed to just dealing with like life is challenging. Like,
but
there's
the weird thing is,
it's not simple. Like it's not, it's not like, oh, okay, I got it all figured out. That's not how it works.
Can you be? Here's a question, right? This speaks to like I forget, what was the movie Whiplash or something about the drummer a few years ago?
Yes, the drummer. Yes, J.K. Simmons. Yes,
good movie, right?
Yes,
but if you were well adjusted and you have your priorities in order, would you have become a successful writer? Or,
I know.
Don't you
think
need
it
to
all the time?
Like if you have if you've got it all balanced out and figured out, and if you're not thirsty to get successful, like would you have done it? I
totally agree. And the other thing, I forget who it is. I always forget this quote. It's one of my favorite quotes. And I'm paraphrasing, but it's like money is like seawater. The more you drink, the thirstier you get, and so too is fame. And I think about that all the time. Like if you think all the people you see on TV who are very well compensated and famous, at least DC famous, if you think they are all happy, I can guarantee you they are not. Like and that's the thing is like, what do you, what I think of? It's it's one of the Bourne movies. It's one where Matt Damon is in it. And he confronts a guy sent to kill him. And he says like, look at what they make us do. Like, look at what they make us sacrifice. And I think of that all the time. It's like, yeah, you whoever you can in your minds, I think, man, I wish I was that person. If I was that person, I would be totally satisfied and totally happy. I have met that person in my own life a couple times through TV stuff. And that person is not as happy as you think they would be. And they are thinking, if only I was that person. Then there's always in that the danger of comparison like that. I just,
the thief of joy.
It really is. And I don't know whether I have more time to think about it now, whether it's just I'm older and so I think about it more, but I spend a lot of time kind of like trying to stay grounded in, not to get too new agey, but trying to stay grounded and just be like, okay, you are able to make a career out of writing and talking about politics. That's pretty great. Like, yes,
winning.
There are people who have more Substack subscribers. Yes, there are people who have lots more YouTube subscribers, but that's okay. Like,
well, that's the other thing. And dude,
it's not a zero-sum game.
We could talk about this all day long, but it used to be that you could be like a columnist at a magazine or a newspaper, and you didn't know how many people were reading you.
Right.
Like, you know what I mean?
Correct.
You couldn't. It was harder to compare because it's like, well, I'm a writer. Let's say I'm a columnist at National Review. I know how many copies of National Review sell at the newsstand approximately, but I don't know if people are skipping over me to get to someone else's article. I didn't know. You didn't at a granular level. You didn't know. It was harder to compare. And you could delude yourself into thinking, well,
everybody reads me.
Yeah.
It's an interesting. Again, it was a forced thing on me. It's not like I was like, I need a break from all this. Like it was, it was forced upon me, and I'm not sure I would have. I'm not sure. My contract was up April of 2024 with CNN. I'm not sure if they had offered me to re-up, I wouldn't have. I probably would have. I mean, there were things I didn't like about it, but probably would have. And I probably never would have had kind of that being stripped to the studs feeling where you're kind of like, okay, what is it that I value What do I take enjoyment from? Who am I? I mean, I would have never, and like you said, I think the most important thing is to focus on, it's not like you're an finished product, right? Like I still, particularly as it relates to my faith, I mean, I struggle. Like it's not like I'm where I want to be. But at least I feel like I'm kind of walking down the road in the right direction a little bit more, like directionally it feels better.
I would definitely recommend. Have you been to Columbia Baptist? My old pastor, Jim Bockham.
No.
Or you could just listen to his podcast. But he is, if you like Tim Keller, he's I always learned something.
Okay.
But dude, I've kept you too long. I've got a million.
All good.
But let me just end with. We'll change subjects one last time and end on a fun note, which is who's going to the Super Bowl? Who do you like?
Okay.
Who do you like?
I love it. I love the question. So I guess I'm convinced that this is the year that Josh Allen exercises the Patrick Mahomes demon and the Bills get to the Super Bowl. Every time I watch the Chiefs, I know Kelsey will be able to turn it on at some point, right? I mean, I think he's older, so he's kind of like, he's only going to work super hard when he needs to work super hard, which I understand. But I just don't think they have the weapons. Like, Mahomes is still Mahomes, and betting against him seems
barely
odd.
winning. They're winning every game by like 3 points.
Yes,
so.
And at some point, I feel like that luck runs out. So I like the Bills. And then this is more of this is less an analytical pick than a heart pick. I just like Dan Campbell. Like I kind of like a willingness. We talked about it a little bit, but a willingness to kind of be like, why does everyone do the thing the same way if there's not like a clear reason for it?
He impressed me.
I'm pro that succeeding. Plus, I like Jared Goff because everyone wrote him off. Number 1 overall pick. Everyone wrote him off. That Sean McVay got rid of him, and he's threw 5 touchdowns on Sunday. I mean, like he's not going to be the MVP, but he's in the top 8-ish quarterbacks that you'd want. And I love that reclamation. Like, just because you don't succeed immediately doesn't mean you can't succeed.
Well, and what I love about this is these are, Detroit, long-suffering football team, right? Never been to the Super Bowl, I don't think. Yep. And then the Bills went to 4 in a row and lost them all, which
brutal.
Is worse, ironically. So we've got at least 2 teams that are, Cinderella type story or happy ending. And then you've got like Harbaugh and the Chargers.
Yeah, that's interesting. I like Herbert.
Yeah.
And I like watching Lamar too. So I would be fine with the Ravens.
I think the Chargers are probably a couple years off, but you never know. They could they could make a run. The Eagles
I have a question. Is that a Cal Ripken rookie card over your right shoulder?
Not.
Wait, I can't hear you.
That'll be cleaned up in post-production.
Cleaned it up in post.
Or maybe I'll just let it be authentic.
Exactly.
His rookie card is 82. This is 84 tops. It's actually bigger than a normal card.
Yes, I see it now, yes.
Yeah, but this was put out, like I bought this in 1984. It's not
awesome.
Yeah, it's not like a collector's thing.
My dad who passed in 2020, but he and I were, I'm an only child, and we would go every weekend to baseball card conventions in Connecticut. And so I've got slews of cards. Anyway.
All right.
Another conversation for another day.
This was so much fun. I really appreciate you doing it. I'm loving this.
Thank you.
How do people get the Substack, YouTube, all that?
It's easy. So my last name is hard to spell, so I'll do it. If you want the Substack, which I would say 75% of it's free, 25% you got to pay for, Chris Cillizza, so CILLIZZA.substack.com, or you can just type my name into and Substack and it'll come up. YouTube is just youtube.com/Chris Cillizza again, or you can type YouTube and Chris Cillizza and it should come up. So those are the 2 big ways that I'm sort of putting content out these days. I make a video every day on YouTube and I write multiple times a day on Substack. So
is that the key?
You'll get
is that the
content.
Key? Is it consistency? Is it quantity?
Drumbeat. It's all habit building. Wow. Yeah, it's all habit building. I think you just got to be, and particularly with Substack where it's an email to people, I think you just got to be in their email inbox. Just like
so it doesn't turn them off. They're not like
some people are like, this is too much. But my view essentially is like, okay, like it's probably about a 5-to-1 ratio. People who are like, it's okay. Like, I don't read everything you write, but I'm glad you're doing it.
Yeah.
So
Love it.
you know, and I've always been someone who writes a lot. So I kind of default to that. And I think generally speaking, I mean, quality does matter, but more content is better than less content, just as is my sort of operating philosophy.
And it doesn't have
when
to
you're
be
on your own, you're on your own.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And
like
it doesn't have to be a 750 word.
No, not at all.
Well thought out column. Sometimes it's like, hey, I'm taking your questions. And, you know,
that's it.
My way.
Totally.
So, yeah.
Totally.
Awesome.
Okay.
Dude,
all right, my friend.
So good. Thank you,
Have
Chris Cillizza.